Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Thanks so much for joining us. Joe Biden dropped out, so we are going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to talk about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And I am live from Outer Banks, North Carolina, outside, so if you hear some chirping, I apologize, but this is the only quiet place in a house of 23 people. Here we are. Reinhold will join me on the other side of this break, and then we'll get started on the race for president in 2024. We just can't get a break. Like I said last episode, it is What's the Billy Joel song, where he lists all the crazy things that happened in his lifetime since 1949. Reinhold, that's what it's like just this week. Yeah, we didn't start the fire.
Yeah. I'm more brought to the old curse that people would leave with each other, the old Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times.
It really feels, I don't feel like it's a curse because we do this show, so there's always something to talk about, so I'm greatly enjoying what's going on. Forget how I saw it yesterday. Oh, somebody texted the letter to me. And Joe Biden has COVID. He is currently in his house an hour north of me in Rehoboth Beach. I'm in the Outer Banks of North Carolina with my wife and her entire family. She's the oldest of 11, and 3 of them are married, so we're having a great time. It's always a lot of fun, but when you say, I'm going to go podcast, and they're all going to the beach, they look at you a little weird. Like, maybe you've got a problem.
Yeah, the beach isn't always all that cracked up to be.
All right, this is a good point. I'm not a beach person. It's enough with the beach after an hour. There's sand everywhere. It's dirty.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of the beach so much, but I love being on a boat.
Yes.
Former Navy. I love boats. I'd love to be on a sailboat right now. But
you don't go on any vacations, do you?
I have the inability to go on many vacations with the situations I'm in right now. Hopefully one day I'll be able to get out and see the world again.
We won't go to the beach, I promise, when we take our wall vacation. When we finally get everybody to go, we'll rent a house like this where there's enough for 23 people. But so we all turned on CNN and then tried to out crazy each other with conspiracy theories as to why he was doing it. So my crazy conspiracy theory was that his staff wanted this to happen. Okay, so here's what I think. You tell me if this is crazy. Joe Biden has been bad. He's gotten worse over the last year. His brother, Frank, was quoted yesterday as saying, I hope he enjoys what time he has left, which the Biden administration put out a statement saying, Frank's an alcoholic, don't listen to him, which is almost verbatim. But when your brother says what time he has left, it sounds like you're sitting in hospice eating pudding. Just been clear that Biden doesn't have the faculties to do this, and they can't convince him not to do it. And all of his advisors are very close to him and have been with him a long time. Biden is an outcast in this. If you can't tell, the Obama, Pelosi, Schumer, Clinton network that makes up the Democratic Party, Biden has always been to the side of that. He's been in Washington forever, but it's still cliquey, and he's got his own clique. And those people aren't going to push him out. Ron Klain, who's been with him forever, and some of these other folks, the names that you'll hear today, they're not going to push him out, but people know he's in rough shape. So they schedule a televised debate before a convention for the first time ever. And then when that goes badly, they decide to put him out in 118 different appearances and then let Obama, Pelosi, and everybody else do the dirty work of pushing him out, because they know he's not going to step aside. So that's my conspiracy theory. And someone else, their conspiracy theory was that it's going to come out that Biden was touching all the kids that he was sniffing. So I thought I had a radical one there, but do you think my theory sounds plausible that he got pushed out because he wasn't willing to make the decision back late last year that was right for him, for the country, and right for the Democrats?
I think he got pushed out. I just don't know when it started and who started it. So I think there's been a lot of talk about it before the debate. And I believe what they wanted to do was put the debate up there up at first and early to say, look how good he's doing. Stop this talk. He's doing great. Unfortunately, they over-prepped him. He's not 100%. He's doing what he can. He's struggling. And he didn't do a great job at the beginning of that debate. Now, he came back around near the end, but it was still not good enough. He had to come out and be top game, and he was not that. in order to quell the thing. So that immediately started the talk. And I think I think you had a portion of his internal circle that was wanting to push him out because they were the ones that debate prepped him and they didn't want to take the blame for what they did. So they were like, okay, he's got to go. He's not doing good, blah, blah, blah. It was pretty obvious, though, that the leadership of the DNC, the people who run that organization, run that group, have decided that he was not doing well. The polling was looking worse. And they told him I guess the final straw was they told him that the path to victory for him was gone, that there was no more path to victory for him, which they said the same thing to Trump in July of 2016. That doesn't mean anything. There's a lot of things going on. You've got the Kennedy people where they're going to break to, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of stuff that was in play for this, but the reality is that he was dragging down his run with all of this.
Yeah. Whether
it's right or not. Yeah.
The thing is, Biden, when you look at Trump back in 2016, there was no path to victory, but Trump has a way of creating his own political reality. And I think it became increasingly clear over the last 3 weeks that Joe Biden couldn't overcome his political reality. When you look at just Joe Biden he's making phone calls and he's yelling at people. When certain things are happening, instead of getting on the phones or working the phones, he's disappeared. He's been disappeared and I don't mean that in the CIA sense, but that's part of the problem here, is that his team kept him from making a lot of phone calls, being an engaged president like Obama, Bush, or Clinton, where they were meeting with Capitol Hill a lot, going to Capitol Hill. They were attending fundraisers. They were giving a lot of press conferences and speeches. And Joe Biden wasn't doing that. He was doing some ceremonial things, but he wasn't as interactive with the party. And this is what killed Richard Lugar here. Richard Lugar was like an icon here in Indiana politics forever and was a senator. He was the mayor of Indianapolis, then became senator, and was the political establishment here in Indiana, but didn't even have a residence here by the end of his career, by the end of the 2000s, I've been engaged in local politics for 25 years. I had never met Richard Lugar. He was the only major political figure I had never spoken to when I worked in the press or politics. And he just wasn't around a lot. So when his time in the barrel came along was it 2012 that he lost to Murdoch in the primary? I think it was 2010 or 2012. He lost to the state treasurer in the primary. And it's because he just didn't have those fundamentally solid connections with the party. And I think that's a little bit of what happened here. So I think Democrats didn't have a good appreciation for how bad Joe Biden was. If you were following Trump's Instagram and you were following a lot of like right-wing accounts like I do, you could see on a regular basis how bad he was. But the worst clip in a while was that fundraiser where he was wandering on stage and Barack Obama had to pull him off. That was the Clooney fundraiser. And that, I think, seems to be the moment when a lot of donors, a lot of the Obama world seemed to get a little spooked by how rough he was, how bad his was. And then, okay, maybe that's a bad night. But then he has the bad night at the debate. And I think, our buddy Jeremiah over at the Boss Hog of Liberty kind of made the point. There was more bad days than good days. He had a lot of good days. I agree with you. I actually think that the debate wasn't as bad as people said, because I didn't watch it initially. I just saw the reaction. I was like, this must have been really bad. And then I went and watched it on a plane flying down to Atlanta, where I could just focus on the debate. I actually thought he was better in that debate than he has been in a lot of press conferences and appearances that he's been in the last 6 months. So his worst, I've seen him worse than he was in that debate when I'm watching just random clips of speeches and things. And yeah, so if we get into, I'll let you fill in the gaps there if you want while I pull up how this happened. So there's a lengthy article about how this actually went down.
Yeah. So I got a couple things real quick. One is that a lot of the clips you were seeing from the Republicans on how bad he was doing, some of those were manipulations and stuff and embellishments of the things that were bad and the way they were framed and cut and everything. That doesn't mean that he wasn't having bad days and there weren't problems. It's just that when you catch people doing that, you start to question, oh, this is just them putting out misinformation. And you start to not listen to what's being said and not paying attention as well, as hard as you will. The debate, he started off really bad. I watched the first 10, 15 minutes and was just like, oh my God, he's not, because
I think
he had to come out and kill it.
Sorry to interrupt, but you nailed, I think, a key piece of the problem with the division in the country is that because the other guys are saying it, I'm going to reflexively say nuh-uh. And I think the way that I look at things is let's take everybody seriously and listen to their point and assume that everybody's telling the truth and that the reality is that all of these things are true. So I think it's a much tougher mentally to process the news. But yeah, Biden is rough and wandering around the stage. I've got to defend my guy because of my tribe. It gets you in trouble.
It's that, but it's also how much just demagoguery and over exaggerations and misinformation are each side of the political spectrum doing right now. It's two different worlds when you look at what they're saying. When you go to like ground news or something like that, when you look at what the people, or allsides.com is another one, you look at what the people on the left are saying about a news story and what the people on the right are saying. It's like I'm watching two different worlds, right? And it becomes hard to, when somebody like Charlie Kirk or somebody like that comes out and says this stuff. And then you've got the people on the left, I was thinking of
selectively edited clips.
Yeah, but
didn't have a lot of power.
They're doing a lot of manipulation. They're doing a lot of just lying. And it becomes hard to then discern what's real and what's not from that. So that's when I see with Biden.
Did they get this right?
I think they were I think they're over exaggerated on certain things, but I think Biden's gone downhill. I'm not saying he hasn't. I don't think he's necessarily up for the job as people want that job to be. I'd much prefer.
I think you're being too generous. Here's why.
I know you think
because I know, but if this were Charlie Kirk saying this, then I'd go, yeah, you're right, Reinhold. But this is Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton. This is Chuck Schumer. This is the people who are in the know and know things. Let's just think about human nature. And this is another way to apply when you're watching the news. Think of everybody as an actual human being and their foibles and their problems. Joe Biden, clearly things are worse than we think. Things are probably worse than the clips that Charlie Kirk posts of Turning Point USA, which is a right-wing organization. Because they were willing... This is unprecedented in that you take the democracy line off the table or put at great risk that this is the main line of the entire campaign is that you have to vote for the Democrats and Joe Biden to save democracy. Then you go through the primary process. He gets 18 million votes. And then the elites of the party say, nuh-uh. So now you've completely damaged the reputation of that talking point. You risk having an open convention, which as Libertarian Party people, we know how incredibly divisive, hurtful, and Chase Oliver is deeply wounded as a campaign because of our convention, right? The Libertarian Party convention. The wounds of that have not gone away. You've got a chair who's attacking his campaign because things didn't go their way. You risk having an open convention, which can really mess up. And then you have a primary on steroids with everybody watching, where the problem with a primary is that your candidate leaves banged up with a lot of bad talking points and hurt feelings from a primary. Now imagine that in a week and a half, and it's all on television instead of over several months where people aren't paying attention. So I think this is a huge risk for the Democrats. And they wouldn't have made this. There was one article that I was reading in Politico that Nancy Pelosi was giving Joe Biden 3 weeks. I think 4 weeks. And the line was Nancy Pelosi was doing it the easy way for 3 weeks and was about to do it the hard way, which is publicly Hakeem Jeffries, Pelosi, Schumer, Obama, everybody coming out and humiliating him by saying he can't run. I don't know how you look at that any other way than this guy is in worse shape than we are being told when they are taking that level of risk.
I believe that it's because, so you understand when you hear them talk, they're saying that he can't win. they're not saying that he can't function as a president or he can't do the job or any of that stuff. He's saying, or they'll still be calling him to resign, and he's not doing that. He couldn't win the election, and that's what their concern was. It's cynical. I don't think they care about whether he's in good shape or not, or what his problems might be or anything like that. It's whether they can win the election. So they're willing to just destroy him in order to get that out of the talking points and move on to someone else. Biden messed up a lot over the years. He got elected. He had a 55% approval rating, and it started to nosedive. And he didn't do the things he needed to do to get that back up again, because he just figured it'll work itself out. And then when Trump is making it very obvious that he's running again and he's got support to do it, they're not working on anything other than Biden's going to go and beat him again. That's what he's thinking. I have to be the one to beat him again because I'm the only one who can beat him, which isn't true. I think anybody but Hillary could beat him. Yeah, I guess we're going to see what's going on there, if that's going to be the case or not. So how much of this is his faculties being that far gone, or how much of it is a perception and we don't want to lose the election, right?
Yeah. So fair enough. Let's transition into an article from Politico that I'll put up on the screen here that outlines why did this happen? How did this happen? Because I can't wait personally for the book. Like, Mark Halperin has taken a lot of slings and arrows over the last few days because he's been saying he's quitting, and everybody's here on Newsmax. But Halperin wrote the book Game Change with John Heilman and did Political Circus on on Showtime, and has a very credible track record, not with women, but with political reporting. But he's been saying he was dropping out, and it's been rumored. But I can't wait for the Game Change book on this election, about the assassination, the dropping out, the internal workings of the Harris campaign spinning up in 108 days. Like, it's just a fascinating time to be alive. So Politico wrote an article, Why Biden Quit, with how he went into his decision. Because on Saturday, we're recording this on Monday morning, July 22nd, 2024. So Saturday, July 20th, he was telling people he was running, and it was full steam ahead. They were doing delegate phone calls and fundraising phone calls as a campaign at the very moment that Biden put out the X post that said he was quitting. If you don't know, Biden is holed up in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. I guess for all intents and purposes, his house, but it's like a beach house in Delaware. And he called on Sunday let me read the article so I'm accurate. Steve Ricchetti, who's been with Biden since his days in the Senate, drove to see the president at his house on the Delaware shore on Friday. Mike Donnellan arrived on Saturday. The two men, both of whom had been by Biden's side during key decisions about whether to seek the presidency in 2016 and 2020, presented damning new information in a meeting that would hasten the end of Biden's political career. In addition to presenting new concerns from lawmakers and updates on fundraising operations that had slowed considerably, they carried the campaign's own polls, which came back this week and showed his path to victory in November was gone, according to five people familiar with the matter, who, like others interviewed for this article, were granted anonymity to discuss the private conversations. Biden asked several questions. Also, there were a couple of the deputy chief of staff and the first lady's assistant. At 1:45, he notified a somewhat larger group of aides that he had decided the night before to end his quest for another term, reading his letter and thanking them for his service. Then on Sunday, he would release that letter on social media. So I guess they had a historic day in the Democratic Party in terms of fundraising. The third largest day since Act Blue, which is this website that kind of is like an all-encompassing site. You can go to Act Blue and make a donation to specific candidates or to the party in general or to the campaign. They brought in over $50 million in a single day after he quit. Now, remember, he quit in the middle of the day, so today may be even bigger than that. But before that, it was down to $200,000 a day. Not millions. And so now you're going to see millions. And I don't know about you, Reinhold, but I'm just looking at, you can look at fundraising numbers. And yesterday was maybe the best fundraising day in Dem history. But another place to judge enthusiasm, because this is a turnout election. Everybody knew who Biden and who Trump were. And now there's going to be some excitement trying to learn about Harris, and we'll see if she is exciting to the Democratic base. But when you go and look at the comments on meme pages, and I know this is silly, but if you were to go look at meme pages, Biden just never could catch a break on the Shade Room or some of these big pages. And I saw that completely flip yesterday. I saw a ton of excitement online in these 4,000 comments saying, let's go, let's do this, let's go. I guess I just, because I'm a creature of the right, didn't have an understanding or awareness of how deeply unpopular Joe Biden was, especially with his own voters. It was like Miss Pat said, I'm voting against Donald Trump. I'm not voting for Joe Biden.
And that's what this whole race has always been about, voting for or against Donald Trump. It's like a wet noodle could be running, or a turtle or whatever. It didn't matter who was in that chair. But it's not going to hurt you to have somebody in there who people who aren't as ambivalent to or just don't really rate. So there's a lot of people who had a lot of issues with Biden because of what was going on in Israel and Palestine right now. And so there was a lot of talk about that. And I guess, like you said, Biden's always been on the outside of that whole cliquey thing anyway. He's went his own way. He's always seen himself as a working class Democrat, which is ironic, funny, but ironic, but it's still, that's how he saw himself. And he never really meshed well with a lot of other people. He was always tooting his own horn to the point where he would embellish a lot of things, that would end up getting him in trouble. He wasn't exactly the best with the truth all the time. And I think
let me interject there. Joe Biden lies as much as Donald Trump does. He is a liar of the first order, including and even down to lying about his uncle being eaten by cannibals, which, okay. I think Joe Biden is a liar of the first order. His first presidential campaign, this is the third one he's dropped out of, but his first one ended because of plagiarism, because he lied and cheated on a college paper. Like, he's not an honest man. And I know, let me say something nice about Joe Biden. I'm sure this was very difficult for him. This is his life's ambition. He is humiliated. He's making a decision because he thinks it's best for his party. It's best for the country. He's not putting himself first, which is a character trait we are not used to seeing from politicians.
Sure.
I do think he is patriotic in that sense. Yeah. I do think he's a good man. He's a good man in that he cares about his family. But this talk of he's the greatest man since FDR and all these things, I'm just like, come on, this dude lies all the time. Like, the greatest first term in presidential history. Give me a break. I'm not sad to see him go.
No. He's wanting to not tarnish what he's built as his reputation, right? He didn't want it to be at the tail end. And I also find it ironic that Pelosi's the one who's going to dictate whether or not he's got his faculties enough to run when she has her own moments and issues, right? And she shouldn't be doing anything anymore anyway. Because
if you're Hakeem Jeffries, aren't you like, she's not the speaker anymore. And this is like why the Pope is supposed to not like the Pope Benedict has never spoken or done anything, because it's when the one Pope retires, they still have a power base. They're not supposed to use that and undermine the current voice of God on earth. And that sort of like struck me as odd that Pelosi has been such a power player. Like, if I'm Hakeem Jeffries, the current Speaker of the House, or not Speaker of the House, Majority Leader for the Democrats, I'm going, hey, get out of here.
Yeah, and there's a lot of excitement about Hakeem Jeffries too. I watched him give some speeches and do some things, and I'm like, this guy's good. This guy could be, in 10 years, 15 years, he could be on the ticket running. I think he's that capable from what I've seen. Now, time will tell whether or not that's all just good in the moment type stuff. But that's what the Democrats have, this problem with not understanding how to make things look good for the people. Like, they should have been building up Kamala Harris for the last 4 years, because even if you think that Biden's going to run again and you think he's capable and everything else, he's still pushing in some high age there that anything can happen. So you want somebody to be able to come in and take over and be wanted by the people. And she nosedived so fast, along with Joe Biden, but she nosedived really fast, and they just shelved her.
I think they lost trust in her. They lost trust in that.
Could have been.
But I don't think they were comfortable enough pushing through. They put her in charge of immigration. She came out and said, "Don't come." She had a lot of really embarrassing moments, and I think they just didn't want to take a risk on her anymore.
Yeah,
and they shelved her. And I think she's got some real problems in terms of her electability. And I reposted our episode from 2020 when she was announced as the vice president, going through her record. It's not a stellar record. And she's had one contentious race. Mm-hmm. That was for AG, in which Donald Trump and Ivanka Trump donated to Kamala Harris, by the way. And she barely won that. She dropped out of the presidential race because she was at 3%, and she was losing in California in the presidential primary. She was picked because Joe Biden had promised to pick a woman, and she was the most obvious choice. And the Republicans call her a DEI hire. I don't think that it's entirely fair, but it's not totally out of the bounds because she was picked because she was a woman. Her traits as a Black woman, an Indian woman, a woman, put her at the forefront of that pick. I'm not saying that there was a white man who was a better choice, but it's not a crazy talking point.
But one thing I'm getting at, though, is that they know these problems in 2021. And let's say they do lose faith in her and they shelve her. You have access to a lot of good people who understand politics, a lot of good thinking people, Jim Carville, those kinds of things. Get them with her, get working with her for 6 months to a year, whatever it takes to get her up to snuff. Why don't they do that? Because she wasn't doing anything else. It's not like she had a real job, right? She could have been working to really better herself and put herself into this moment. And nobody did this. I don't understand what they're thinking with this stuff. Joe doesn't worry about his approval rating. Kamala gets shelved and nobody does anything about it. And now they're in a position right now where they have to go, oh, this is our best option, and we hope it's enough.
I think
you could have prepared yourself.
Yeah, I think the reason the Democrats remind me a lot of the Libertarian Party. It's a party of people pleasers. They are way more than libertarians, because there's definitely that libertarian streak of I'm going to say the truth and you deal with it. But there's also a streak in the Libertarian Party of we need to be a broad appeal party. We need to appeal to a lot of people who aren't going to like us anyways. But the Democrats it's a coalition party. So they always seem to be trying to appeal to some branch of the coalition. They always seem to try to flatter and appeal to the press. There's always somebody, whereas the Republicans, especially under Trump, don't try to appeal to people. That's to their detriment. Not appealing to the masses, to the broad swath of voters because of ideological or cult of personality reasons is to their detriment. I think the opposite is true of the Democrats. They're always trying to make someone happy, and if there is a problem, hiding the problem because we want to be liked. Yeah, I definitely think that is a problem. Kamala Harris, I think the Trump campaign did not want this to happen. There's a great article by Tim Alberta, I think, at The Atlantic. I'll put all the articles of the kind of big grand narratives of what's going on into the show notes, but Alberta is real close to a lot of Trump people and was basically saying this is their worst case scenario. They're unhappy. They thought that they had this sewn up. They were leaving the convention. This is a slam dunk. We're going to win. Joe Biden can't drop out now. It's too late. We're going to cream him. And they would have. Joe Biden would have lost. Now I think there's a real chance. This is a real race, and I didn't think that on Friday.
Yeah, there's some effort being put out by Heritage Foundation, who are trying to sue to keep Joe Biden on the ballot in several states, like Ohio and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, that sort of thing. There's some laws that if you read the right way, can say one thing, but the courts have said other things. They're trying to do their thing where they're trying to make it fit their narrative.
Yeah, on that. Basically, there are states where... Okay, so it's just, if you don't understand the process, the primary system is closed party business. The primary system is the taxpayers funding party functions for Republicans and Democrats. The Libertarians, for instance, choose everything at state conventions and the national conventions. They don't choose on taxpayer-funded ballots. And the primary system is set up as a way to judge the will of the people, but it is not legally binding. It is closed party business that is then sent to the delegates. And so the primaries, you are selecting the delegates that then go to the convention to vote for the candidate. And this is an argument for getting rid of the primary system and going back to conventions, which is, I think, a much better way to do it. Now, why do I say that? Oh, democracy. Democracy doesn't exist in this system because this is a closed political party. Republicans are not allowed to come to conventions and participate in Democratic conventions and vice versa. That's cheating. So this is actually, I think, Tegan Goddard over at Political Wire made the point that the Republican Party is unhealthy and the Democratic Party is healthy, in that when a personality within the party, even though they are very powerful, like the President of the United States, when they make the wrong decision, the party has the ability to bring that person to heel. And the Republicans cannot do that. They don't have any control over what Donald Trump does. And Donald Trump has completely broken that over the last decade. And the importance of these parties being able to control a single person is a really good sign of an institution looking out for the public. Because the institution can then say, you're out of bounds, or you're unfit, or you are making the wrong decision, and there are going to be consequences if you keep going down this road. And so then the party brings that person to heel, and it doesn't involve the criminal courts. It doesn't involve government functions like special investigations or impeachments. It is a private institution dealing with one of their own when they are out of bounds. And the Republican Party doesn't have that. So by removing the primary system where the candidates are going directly to voters and relying more on money and moving back to the convention system, you actually embolden the parties, which I'm for, emboldening the party structures because of what I just outlined. I think cults of personality are not helpful in an era of big money, in an era where trust is declining, and delegate conventions build trust because you have to have one-on-one conversations with the people most invested in the party, as opposed to just like an amorphous blob of voters, and we're relying on polls, and everybody knows those are sketch, right? So when Biden dropped out because of his own internal polling, it matched the polling of other Democrats in battleground states. It matched other polling at media outlets. And so they're just reading the tea leaves, as opposed to a bunch of delegates saying, yeah, I'm not voting for you. It's messier, but I think it adds a lot of checks and balances, Reinhold.
Yeah, it does. And part of the problem with the primary system, too, is that some states, they are now doing open primaries where you can go and vote for anybody. You can be a Republican, but you can just say you're a Democrat and go vote in the Democrat primary. It's happened. A lot of people are complaining about that. And there was a court case a little while back where that happened, and the party, I think it was the Democratic Party, was able to have those delegates thrown out or ignored or whatever, because they said that they weren't representative of the will of the people, as it were. So I was legally has a whole thing on the legalese behind what the Heritage Foundation is trying to do. So it's interesting to see that. And he goes through some of the bylaws on the DNC and what's allowed and what's not allowed and everything else. And
yeah, because each of these states have their own laws. Just to add into that, each of these states have their own laws, and they because like in Indiana, your ballot access is due to the state by early July. They put a stand-in and then they switch it out, right?
Yeah, so they do a straw poll or something, yeah.
So like, for instance, the convention is August 19th in Chicago, but the deadline to put Joe Biden on the ballot here in Indiana is like in July. And so what they do is they put in a stand-in and then switch that out. I'm getting looks, which means my son must be losing his mind. So they put these stand-ins in and then switch them out after the convention ratifies the actual candidate.
Well, one thing that throws a wrench in all of this, in my opinion, which I think I'm outside the norm, so this is a hot take that a lot of people aren't going to clam onto, but there was a recent Supreme Court decision stating that you can't have a system with the presidential election where a candidate is on the ballot in some states and not on others. And it's like they did that in order to prevent states from saying that Trump couldn't be on the ballot because of the 14th Amendment. But doesn't that kind of cut both ways? Can the states be telling the party that they can't put Kamala Harris on the ballot when if you do, you're going to have this hodgepodge of things? And that was their concern. The Supreme Court's concern, what they wrote in their decision, was they didn't want to have on the only federal election that exists, even though it's not a federal election, it's a state election, tell the delegates. Their comments on that decision has repercussions. And I think that somebody could be using those repercussions in either a third party who's getting told they can't be on certain ballots in certain states, or something like this with a situation where now Joe Biden's and they're trying to fight and have his name left on because of these rules. There's precedent there that they could go and try to work through to have that reversed. So
the other place they're looking at challenging is if they give her the campaign's money. So people have donated to the Biden-Harris campaign. And so Harris's name is on the FEC filings, which means she is eligible to receive the funds from the campaign. If it were a different candidate, those funds would have to be transferred to the DNC. But the former head of the FEC, who's a Republican that got kicked out of Trump World, in the Wall Street Journal, wrote an article that Biden is only allowed to give her $2,000 until she is officially the nominee. So if they give her more than that before, then the Republicans are going to file challenges on the FEC line. So let's give you a breakdown of what happens next. So this is a Politico article that kind of outlines the delegate process that we'll just read through. They're getting granular. Is Biden still the president? But yes, we should say, Reinhold, that he is still the president until 2025. So she gets a leg up by getting the endorsement of Biden and all these coordinated, don't insult my intelligence as if this wasn't planned. You're all within 42 seconds telling us that you're all supporting Harris. So everybody knew. It's very coordinated. So the convention is scheduled August 19th through the 22nd in Chicago, the site of the 68 election, which was when Lyndon Johnson dropped out and there was a contested convention. And there's also a lot of bloodshed.
Johnson was pushed out by the party.
Because of Vietnam.
Very similar.
Yeah, echoes of that. Although party leaders were considering a virtual roll call to name the nominee earlier in the month, the DNC must now decide if it wants to carry through on a virtual roll call or if they want to do it in person. All of those nearly 3,800 Biden delegates now become free agents. Even with Biden's endorsement, the delegates who are pledged to him are under no obligation, according to the DNC's rules, to follow his lead and support a chosen successor. Anyone who can garner enough signatures to have their name placed in nomination can run. Candidates need signatures from at least 300 delegates, but no more than 600 delegates. A candidate cannot submit more than 50 delegates from a given state, a provision to ensure that all candidates placed in nomination earn from a broad swath of the country. There are roughly 4,700 delegates, capping the number of possible candidates around 15. But functionally, there will be far fewer. The pressure to avoid a messy nomination will be enormous. And I'd also say a lot of these candidates like Newsom, Whitmer, everybody, they don't want to run because they don't want to damage their future runs. Because the thing about the Democratic Party is it is the backbone of it is Black women. They make up a lot of the precinct committeemen, a lot of chairmanships, and Black women really are very powerful as a bloc within the party because of that fact. They represent a lot of Democratic voters and organized communities. And so they don't want to be seen as undermining the first Black female nominee. And no Democratic president has ever won the presidency or the nomination without the majority of Black female voters. So how would the roll call work? These 4,000 pledged delegates are awarded, according to the results of the presidential primaries earlier this year. Biden won 90% of them, but as we've said, those 4,700 delegates can now vote for anybody that they want. There are another 750 automatic delegates, once known as superdelegates. They're elected officials, party leaders, and former luminaries like Obama, Clinton, people that aren't out in their communities organizing, aren't placing their name on ballots. If you want to run for a delegate spot, I think in Indiana here, you sign up to be a delegate to the convention, of which I did back in 2002. You win a spot to be a delegate at the state convention. Then you sign up to be selected as a delegate to the national convention at your state convention. Same way it works in the Libertarian Party. Bill Clinton isn't going through all that, right? So they give them super delegate status. After the 2016 campaign, these automatic delegates were stripped of their role in the first round of voting and only get to vote for the nominee in subsequent rounds if no candidate earns a majority. That rule is usually waived, as it was in 2020, when Biden had a clear support of pledged delegates. They don't know that they'll do that this time. DNC rules allow 20 minutes of nominating speeches for every certified candidate on the first ballot. If no candidate earns a majority on the first ballot, automatic delegates join the voting for the second round. So this sets up an interesting play where you have to make a bunch of calls. You have to get your 50 delegates from each state. You have to get 300 delegates on your side. You have to then line up super delegates on top of that, which is all a very tall order in less than a month to do if you don't have a lot of prominence. So that is why you see Newsom, Whitmer, Joe Manchin now saying he's not going to do it, because Joe Manchin probably would not be able to get that threshold of 50 votes in each state and then get super delegates. There's no real clear path for anyone to run in a serious way against Kamala Harris at this point, because the momentum is very clearly behind her, thanks to Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, and many others throwing their support behind her. Then the vice presidential nominee, that is still to be picked. I'm going to go with someone from, I would say Josh Shapiro, governor of a swing state like Pennsylvania, or Andy Beshear. Kamala Harris's official account was promoting a video of Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, who was a Democrat in a red state with a strong record. If you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican in Kentucky, you don't think that. Here's somebody that can appeal to voters in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. You're looking at probably a white man, Reinhold, as the nominee from the Midwest. That would be my guess. You could see the first all-female ticket with Whitmer from Michigan. Trump is leading in Michigan right now, although this throws all the polls out. Who knows what it's going to look like? Polls are suspect anyways, especially if they don't include Libertarians and Democrats and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on these polls. The poll needs to reflect what the ballot says. Otherwise, it's not valid in any way, shape, or form. It's just going to be an interesting month. I will also say Kamala spent 10 hours yesterday making phone calls in her sweats, and she ordered pizza. What do you think Kamala Harris likes on her pizza? If you were to make a guess.
I'm hoping it's not Hawaiian.
It's worse.
No. Is it the broccoli asparagus thing?
This woman of the people likes anchovies on her pizza.
Hey, nothing wrong with anchovies.
Of course.
I love me some anchovies.
Old Lib Dennis over here with his anchovy pizza.
I love me some anchovy pizza. Are you crazy?
All right, give us your final thoughts, because I've got a crying baby I need to go save, and
sure.
Everybody in the family keeps walking by looking at me like I'm abusing my child as he screams at his crib when they could have picked him up. I'm podcasting here. Come on, people.
Working here. They had I think they did the right thing. So I was saying the other day that I was worried that the Dems were going to do the wrong thing and just throw it open to the DNC and just let whoever bubble to the top. But they've done the right thing where they've got behind Kamala. They're going to, because that's the simplest way to do it, because you eliminate a lot of legal issues that could potentially be problems. You get rid of some of the financial issues that could potentially be problems. You show support behind one person. You don't have a contested delegation. You start to whip up excitement for that person instead of having a knockdown drag out. There's some benefit to having that fight at the delegation where the bad stuff can come out and we can get it out of the way, and then all the stuff that Trump's going to come at her with, we're going to find out early. But I think it's the better play with what they're left with at this point, since they didn't do all the work they should have done before in getting everything ready to go for this. This is their best play, I think.
Yeah, I'd also agree with that. Joe Biden wasn't going to make it another 4 years. I hate to say that. You never want to see anyone in ill health or wishing ill on them. I think he's capable of doing the level of the job that he's doing right now, whatever you think of that, good or bad, for the next few months. But I think if you're looking 4 years down the road, there's just no way. It just wasn't going to work. The American people knew it. It was clear to everybody. He made the right choice. And now American voters get the ability to make the up or down vote on whether they want Kamala to be president, as opposed to a backdoor ascension to the presidency through the 25th Amendment, or God forbid something worse. Mm-hmm. I'm going to leave my final words with the soon to be Democratic candidate herself. Let's just hear from Kamala herself.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know, what can be unburdened by what has been. 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 What we can see, what we believe can be unburdened by what has. What can be unburdened by what has been. 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 Who we can be unburdened by who we have been.
All right, there's 3 more minutes of that. I don't know what that means, but I've worked with candidates in the past where
1,000 points of light.
Right, where they think this just kills, and they're in a position of authority where you can't say this is really stupid. And so she's just going to keep saying this. But the other thing that you'll hear is that, and then also the coconut tree. Just if we're giving a little bit of a backgrounder so people understand what's going on and what's going to happen, you need to know the coconut tree, because that in Gen Z is all that they know about Kamala Harris. I'm trying to say her name right, guys. I'm trying to be somewhat respectful here. But she apparently was... All right, so this is her giving a speech, and she's talking about her mom.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
Okay, so that is the coconut tree reference, if you hear that. So I'll put all that in the show notes so you can check those links out to everything, and you can, that thread of the coconut tree is her funniest moments, and some of them are really George Bush like. Here's what I'd say about her speaking ability. Trump has his own brand of talking, right? And every candidate, Barack Obama, because this case, right? Donald Trump always has blah, 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 right? I'm not a good impressionist. Joe Biden always had a stutter, but obviously he's in a different category. I think Trump is getting, you're going to see the Democrats, and they already are starting to make that. He's the oldest candidate ever to be nominated for president. His mental health has declined too. And I'm all for it. Look, if we can get 2 for 2 on this one, let's use the age thing to get these guys out. Nikki Haley actually said in January that the first party to get rid of their old guy is going to win the presidency. But you're going to see that case of him being his increasing mental decrepitude creeping in. That's going to be on the table big time. But Kamala Harris has like this George Bush way of speaking. I don't think she's a dumb person. And I think it's very difficult to speak for a living. Obviously, I do it, and I'm not great at it. I have a lot of stutters. But she will like laugh in the middle of a sentence. She's got a very odd way of speaking that I think makes her hard to connect with. So we'll see how that goes. But the coconut tree thing and the unburdened by what will be are the 2 main memes that kind of surround Kamala's speaking ability and her Bush caricatures that'll pop up.
She's developed these phrases that she falls back on when she's looking for something or reaching for a thought or something like that, and she needs to fill the space. So you see that a lot. I do it. You can just listen to me on this podcast and hear me reaching for things.
Never going to. Yeah. Not starting now. All right. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining short notice. Thank you, listeners. Glad that we could get this in. Hope that it helps you. If it did, please share it. And we'll see you again here on The Chris Spangle Show.